The snow fell thick enough to swallow the sound of war itself. 3 feet in 48 hours. The town of Ridgemont, Montana had disappeared beneath a blanket of white so complete that the buildings looked like tombstones rising from a frozen grave. The storm had come from nowhere, a freak system that meteorologists were still trying to explain on screens no one was watching anymore. Inside the temporary command post, a requisition warehouse on the edge of town, Colonel James Thornton stood motionless before a wall of thermal displays. His breath came out in clouds despite the space heaters rattling in every corner. At 58 years old, with 35 years of service behind him, he had commanded operations in 6 different theaters. He had pulled off extractions that became textbook cases at Fort Bragg. But this was different. This was impossible. 17 confirmed hostages, Major Diana Walsh reported, her voice tight with controlled tension. 12 civilians who were in the municipal building for permit processing. 5 of ours, clerks from the logistics office across the street. Thornton's jaw tightened. The enemy force had appeared during the storm's peak, moving through the whiteout like ghosts who had trained for exactly this weather. By the time anyone realized what was happening, they had fortified the old Ridgemont Municipal Center. 3 stories of concrete and reinforced windows, built in the 1970s when government buildings were designed to withstand riots. Now it was a fortress. Time frame? Thornton asked without turning from the screens. They've given us until nightfall. 4 hours and 22 minutes. Walsh checked her watch, the gesture automatic, meaningless. Everyone in the room knew the deadline was burned into their minds. After that, they start executing hostages, 1 every 30 minutes. The room absorbed this in silence. Outside, the snow continued its relentless descent. Captain Marcus Chen spread new reconnaissance photos across the central table. The images were grainy, compromised by the storm, but clear enough to show what they were dealing with. We've identified the leader, Chen said. Former military. Delta Force, actually. One of the best we ever trained. Dishonorably discharged 8 years ago on charges of selling classified intelligence to foreign actors. His name is Victor Kessler. Thornton's hand stopped halfway to his coffee cup. That name. He knew that name. Kessler, he repeated quietly. You know him, sir. I signed his discharge papers. Thornton turned slowly from the screens. I was on the tribunal that ended his career. He swore he'd make me pay for it. The room shifted. What had been a terrorist situation was now something more personal, more dangerous. How many hostiles? Thornton asked, forcing his voice to remain steady. 9 confirmed, possibly 2 more we haven't spotted yet. And our forces? 40 personnel within a mile radius. But sir, Chen hesitated, glancing at the tactical overlay. The building is a kill box. They've positioned hostages at every window facing our approach routes. Any assault gets civilians killed before we breach the first floor. Thornton had commanded men through hell. He had made decisions that haunted him at 3 in the morning when sleep wouldn't come. But standing here, watching the thermal signatures of 17 innocent people huddled in that frozen building, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Helplessness. What about negotiation? Lieutenant Emma Brooks suggested from her station near the communications array. They're not negotiating, Walsh replied flatly. Kessler made that clear in his first transmission. He wants media coverage. He wants his manifesto broadcast nationwide. The hostages are leverage, nothing more. And the moment we refuse his demands, he starts killing people to force our hand. Thornton studied the building's blueprint for what felt like the 100th time. Every approach had been wargamed, every possibility mapped, every scenario calculated. All of them led to the same conclusion: unacceptable casualties. We need a miracle, someone muttered from the back of the room. What they needed was something that didn't exist in any manual, a way to neutralize the threat without triggering a massacre, a solution that defied every principle of tactical engagement. The radio crackled to life. Colonel Thornton. The voice was calm, controlled, cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Victor Kessler. I know you're in that warehouse trying to figure out how to be a hero. Let me save you the trouble. You can't win this. Every minute you waste is a minute these people have left. 4 hours. Then we start with the child. Thornton's blood turned to ice. Oh yes, Kessler continued, and there was a smile in his voice now. the satisfied tone of a predator who had cornered his prey. "We have a child, 8 years old. Cute little thing. She was here with her mother for a passport application. Wrong place, wrong time. But I'm sure you understand how that works, don't you, Colonel? You signed papers that ended my life 8 years ago. Wrong place. Wrong time for me, too." The transmission cut to static. Every screen in the room switched to the same external feed. Through the snow, barely visible, a figure was being pressed against the third-floor window. Small, fragile, a child. Victor Kessler stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other holding a pistol that gleamed even through the storm. His face was a mask of triumph. "Sir," Walsh said quietly, "what do we do?" Thornton didn't answer immediately. Instead, his mind traveled back 23 years, to a desert in Kuwait, to a night when everything had gone wrong and only one man's impossible shot had saved his life. Master Sergeant William Hartwell. Ghost, they had called him. The best sniper Thornton had ever known. A man who could thread a bullet through a needle at 800 yards in a sandstorm. A man who had died 3 years later, saving his squad, shot by an enemy he never saw because his spotter had waited too long for perfect conditions. William had left behind a wife and a daughter. "Captain Chen," Thornton said slowly, "get me the personnel files for the reconnaissance unit attached to Fort Harrison." "Sir, there's someone I need to find." The argument that followed was the loudest the command post had seen all day. "With all due respect, Colonel, this is insane." Master Sergeant Ray Cooper stood at the head of the tactical table, his face flushed with frustration. At 45, he was the most experienced sniper in the region. 26 confirmed kills. Longest verified shot at 900 yards in clear conditions. He had already refused to attempt the shot. "The distance alone makes this impossible," Cooper continued, jabbing his finger at the map. 1,200 yards minimum from any viable position. Through heavy snow, wind gusting to 40 miles per hour with unpredictable shifts, temperature affecting ballistics in ways we can't calculate. And the windows, he shook his head. They're old double-pane glass from the 70s, half covered in ice now. Bullet trajectory will deflect, but we can't know how much without knowing the exact ice thickness. "Sergeant Cooper," Walsh said carefully, "no one is questioning your assessment." "Then why are we having this conversation?" Cooper demanded. "Because the colonel wants to bring in some competition shooter who's never fired a hostile round in her life. Because her father was good? Skill isn't genetic. Neither is courage under fire." Thornton's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Her father saved my life, Sergeant. When every calculation said the shot was impossible, he took it anyway, and he hit. That's not genetics. That's training. That's mindset. That's something you can't measure on a range." "Sir, I'm not ordering anyone to take the shot. I'm not even ordering her to take it. But I am going to give her the choice. Because right now the alternative is watching 17 people die while we stand here arguing about probability." The door opened. Every head turned. She was smaller than most of them expected. 5'6", average build, wearing a white winter coat dusted with snow that made her almost invisible against the storm gray light from outside. Her rifle case was longer than she was tall, carried with the casual ease of someone who had held it 10,000 times before. But it was her eyes that stopped the room. Gray-green like winter ice over deep water. They moved across the tactical displays, the personnel, the maps, absorbing everything without revealing anything in return. "Corporal Sophie Hartwell reporting as requested, sir." Her voice was steady, flat, the voice of someone who had learned long ago to keep emotion locked away where it couldn't interfere with precision. "At ease, Corporal." Thornton studied her for a long moment. She looked like her father. Same eyes, same quiet intensity, same way of standing perfectly still while the world moved around her. "You know why you're here?" "Yes, sir. 17 hostages. Hostile force led by Victor Kessler. Standard assault isn't viable due to hostage placement and terrain conditions." She paused. "You need a precision solution." Cooper stepped forward. "Corporal, I'm going to be direct. The shot we're discussing is beyond normal operational parameters. 1,200 yards in heavy snow, significant wind, through compromised glass. I've been doing this for 12 years. I wouldn't attempt it." Sophie met his gaze without flinching. Then don't, Sergeant. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Excuse me? I said don't attempt it. No one's asking you to. She set her rifle case on the table and opened it with practiced movements. Inside lay an M24 sniper weapon system, older than standard issue, but maintained with obsessive care. The stock showed years of use. The scope had been upgraded twice. But I didn't drive 4 hours through a blizzard to have my qualifications questioned. If you want to know whether I can make the shot, let me assess the conditions. If the shot isn't viable, I'll say so. But that's my call to make, not yours. Walsh stepped in before Cooper could respond. Corporal, let me be very clear about what's at stake here. If you take this shot and miss, hostages die. If you hit the wrong target, hostages die. If your shot causes Kessler to panic and accelerate his timeline, hostages die. Are you prepared to live with that responsibility? Sophie turned to face her. Are you prepared to live with not trying, Major? The silence that followed was brittle enough to shatter. Thornton moved between them. Corporal Hartwell, why are you willing to take a shot that the most experienced sniper in this region says is impossible? Sophie was quiet for a moment. Her hand rested on the rifle case, fingers brushing the worn leather with something that might have been reverence. My father was Master Sergeant William Hartwell. You knew him as Ghost. Thornton nodded slowly. I know. He saved my life in Kuwait. He died 3 years after that. Helmand Province, 2003. His squad was pinned down. Enemy sniper had them zeroed. Our counter-sniper team had the position, but they waited. Her voice remained steady, but something shifted behind her eyes. They waited for perfect conditions. Wind was too strong. Distance was too far. They calculated the probability and decided it wasn't worth the risk. She paused. My father bled out in a drainage ditch while they ran their numbers. The command post had gone silent. The last thing he said to me was over satellite phone, 30 minutes before he died. He called to wish me happy birthday. I was 10 years old. Sophie's jaw tightened. He said, never wait for perfect, baby girl. Perfect doesn't exist. There's only ready and not ready, and a Hartwell is always ready. Thornton felt the words hit him like rounds from a rifle. He remembered William saying something similar the night in Kuwait. Standing over Thornton's wounded body, rifle still smoking, surrounded by dead enemies. The shot you don't take is the only shot guaranteed to miss, Colonel. I'll always take the shot. Corporal Hartwell, Thornton said quietly, I'm authorizing you to assess the situation and make the call. If you determine the shot is viable, you have permission to engage. But this is your decision. I won't order you to attempt something you believe will fail. Understood, sir. And Hartwell? She turned back. Thornton reached into his pocket and withdrew something small, something he had carried for 23 years without ever knowing why. A challenge coin. On one side, the insignia of the 75th Ranger Regiment. On the other, a single word. Ghost. Your father gave this to me the night he saved my life. He said it was for luck, that he'd carried it through 3 deployments without a scratch. Thornton placed it in her palm. I've been holding it ever since, waiting for someone who needed it more than I did. Sophie looked down at the coin, her father's coin. The weight of it was impossible to measure. She closed her fingers around it and met Thornton's eyes. I'll bring it back to you, sir, after the shot. Then she grabbed her rifle, turned, and walked out into the storm. Cooper watched her go, his expression unreadable. She's going to get those hostages killed, he said quietly. Maybe, Thornton replied, or maybe she's going to do something none of us have the courage to try. Courage and suicide aren't the same thing, Colonel. Thornton turned back to the screens, where the thermal image of the child still pressed against the 3rd floor window. Sometimes, Sergeant, they're exactly the same thing. The climb up the water tower was the longest of Sophie's life, 4 blocks from the municipal building, the only position that offered a clear sight line to the 3rd floor windows while providing cover from hostile observation. The structure was old, built in the 1960s, its metal frame encased in ice that made every rung a potential death sentence. But Sophie's hands moved with practiced confidence, never rushing, never hesitating. She had climbed in worse conditions, trained in worse conditions. Her father had made sure of that. At the top, she established her position behind the tower's frozen tank, which provided both cover and a stable shooting platform. The wind cut through her layers like it had personal business with her bones, but she ignored it. Cold was just information. Discomfort was just distraction. Neither had any place in precision shooting. She set up her rifle with mechanical movements perfected over 6 years of obsessive practice. M24 Sniper Weapon System. Remington 700 Action, 7.62 by 51 millimeters NATO rounds. Effective range of 800 meters in standard conditions. Today's conditions were not standard. She pulled out her handheld anemometer and measured the wind. 42 miles per hour, gusting to 58. The wind wasn't just fast, it was turbulent, chaotic, unpredictable in ways that turned long-range shooting from difficult to nearly impossible. She watched the snow patterns, reading the invisible currents the way some people read text. Every gust told a story. Every lull hinted at opportunity. The atmosphere was a living thing, and she had spent years learning its language. Her radio crackled. "Hartwell, this is command. What's your assessment?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied the municipal building through her scope. The third-floor window where Kessler had appeared. The refracted light through ice-covered glass. The heat signature bleeding through cracks in the old structure. "Shot is technically possible," she said finally. "Probability of success is approximately 42% under current conditions." Back in the command post, the number landed like a bomb. 42%. Major Walsh's voice was tight with controlled anger. "You're asking us to bet 17 lives on a coin flip?" Thornton grabbed the radio before anyone else could respond. "Corporal, be specific. What factors are reducing your probability?" Sophie's voice remained flat, professional, the voice her father had taught her to use when emotions would only interfere. "3 primary issues, sir. First, wind turbulence at target location is creating a variable drift pattern. I can compensate for average wind speed, but the gusts are unpredictable within a 3-foot margin. Second, the window glass is standard double pane from the 1970s, now compromised by ice formation on the exterior. Bullet trajectory will deflect upon penetration, but I cannot calculate exact deflection without knowing precise ice thickness. Third, the target won't be stationary. If Kessler moves during the bullet's flight time, I'll miss." Flight time? Approximately 1.8 seconds from trigger pull to impact at this distance and elevation. Captain Chen did rapid calculations at his station. "Sir, that's actually better than I expected given the conditions." "Better than terrible is still bad." Cooper's voice cut through the chatter. 42% isn't a sniper shot, it's a prayer." Thornton keyed the radio again. "Hartwell, what do you need to improve those odds?" A pause, then, "Time, sir. Wind patterns repeat in cycles. If I can observe for another hour, I can predict the optimal window for engagement." "We don't have an hour." "Then 42% is what you get." Walsh grabbed the radio from Thornton's hand. "Corporal, I need you to understand something. This isn't about statistics. This is about human lives, children, families, people who are depending on us to save them. If you take this shot and fail, their blood is on your hands forever. Do you understand that?" Another pause. When Sophie spoke again, her voice was quieter, but no less steady. "I understand, Major. Do you understand that if I don't take the shot, their blood is on all of our hands?" Walsh's face went pale. Thornton took the radio back. "Hartwell, I'm giving you operational command of this engagement. Your call, your timing, your shot. Command will support whatever decision you make." "Understood, sir." "And Hartwell?" "Sir?" Thornton's voice softened slightly. A commander speaking to a soldier, but also an old man speaking to the daughter of a friend he had never stopped mourning. "Your father used to say that probability was just numbers, that people decided outcomes, not mathematics. Whatever happens today, remember that. You're not a percentage. You're a Hartwell." Static. Then very quietly, "Thank you, Colonel." Sophie settled deeper into her shooting position and began the waiting game that every sniper knows too well. The test of patience, of focus, of ignoring doubt until there's nothing left but the shot itself. The minutes crawled past like wounded soldiers. She counted her breaths, monitored her heart rate, made micro adjustments to account for the imperceptible shift of metal contracting in the cold. Her fingers were starting to lose sensation despite the hand warmers. But that was expected. That was manageable. She had shot in colder conditions. Her father had made sure of that too. Through her scope, she watched the municipal building, occasional movement visible through the windows, thermal distortions creating ghosts where there were none. Nothing clear enough to give her the shot she needed. Her radio crackled. Not command this time. A different voice. Corporal Hartwell. She froze. Oh yes, I know you're out there. Victor Kessler's voice was smooth, confident, the voice of a man who believed he held all the cards. Did you think we wouldn't spot your thermal signature on that water tower? You're not exactly hidden, sweetheart. Sophie's finger moved away from the trigger. I know who you are, Kessler continued. Sophie Hartwell, 24 years old, competition shooting champion 3 years ago, enlisted after college, never fired a shot in combat, never killed anyone. He paused. But that's not what interests me. Don't respond, Sophie told herself. He wants you to talk. He wants to get inside your head. What interests me is your father, Master Sergeant William Hartwell, Ghost, the best sniper in the 75th Rangers for almost a decade. Another pause. We served together, did you know that? Before Kuwait, before he became a legend and I became a traitor. He was my instructor for 6 months at Fort Benning. Sophie's hands tightened on her rifle. He was good, your father. Really good. But you know what his weakness was? He was reckless. He took shots he shouldn't have taken. And eventually it caught up with him. Helmand Province, 2003. He thought he could save his squad with an impossible shot. But impossible means impossible. He died in a drainage ditch because he couldn't accept his own limitations. The words hit her like bullets. So here's my question, sweetheart. Are you going to make the same mistake? Are you going to try to be a hero like Daddy and get 17 people killed because you couldn't admit when you were beaten? Sophie's breathing had accelerated. Her heart rate was climbing. Everything her training had taught her was screaming that she was losing control. Then another voice cut through the radio. Colonel Thornton. Kessler, this is Thornton. Colonel, I was wondering when you'd join the conversation. Leave her alone. Your quarrel is with me. My quarrel is with everyone who wore that uniform while they destroyed my life. But yes, Colonel, you're special. You're the one who signed the papers. You're the one who turned a decorated soldier into a disgraced criminal based on evidence that we both know was manufactured. The evidence was real, Kessler. The evidence was convenient. And now 17 innocent people are going to pay for your convenient evidence. Unless you give me what I want. What do you want? A national broadcast. 2 hours of uninterrupted airtime to tell the truth about what the United States Army does to soldiers who ask the wrong questions. And then safe passage out of the country for me and my team. You know I can't authorize that. Then people start dying in... A pause. 3 hours and 41 minutes. The radio went silent. Sophie's hands were shaking. Not from cold, from rage, from grief, from every emotion she had spent 6 years learning to suppress. Her father hadn't been reckless. He had been brave. He had died trying to save his brothers when everyone else was too afraid to try, just like she was doing now. She forced her breathing to slow, counted backwards from 10. Let the emotions drain away until there was nothing left but the cold clarity of the mission. When she keyed her radio, her voice was steady. Command, this is Hartwell. Target attempted psychological destabilization. It didn't work. I'm continuing observation. Copy that, Hartwell. Thornton's voice was warm with something she couldn't quite identify. Pride, maybe, or recognition. Maintain position. And Hartwell, your father wasn't reckless. He was the bravest man I ever knew. Kessler knows that. That's why he's afraid of you. Sophie didn't respond. Instead, she pressed her cheek against the rifle stock and returned her eye to the scope. Watching, waiting, reading the wind. The minutes continued to pass, and then she saw it. A pattern. Not in the snow, not in the wind exactly, but in the way they interacted. Every 3 to 4 minutes, there was a brief lull. The gusts died down. The snowfall thinned. For approximately 12 seconds, the conditions shifted from impossible to merely improbable. She had been watching for 47 minutes when she identified the cycle. Command, this is Hartwell. Go ahead. I've identified optimal firing windows. Wind pattern repeats every 3 to 4 minutes with a 12-second lull, where speeds drop to approximately 35 miles per hour. Snow density reduces by roughly 10% during these windows. Visibility improves correspondingly. Can you make the shot during those windows? Sophie did the math in her head. 35 miles per hour was still terrible. 10% visibility improvement was marginal. The glass deflection remained unknown, but 35 was better than 42, and marginal was better than nothing. If the target presents during a window, probability increases to approximately 53%. That's still barely better than a coin flip. Yes, sir, but it's also better than 42. Thornton's voice came back quiet. Certain. Then we wait for your window. All teams stand by for potential breach on Hartwell's signal. The moment she fires, hit or miss, you have 45 seconds of maximum confusion before hostiles reorganize. That's your window to move. Acknowledgements came back from 4 different teams positioned around the building. Sophie settled deeper into her position. Next optimal window in approximately 2 minutes, 40 seconds. Target has not presented since Kessler's radio transmission. Copy, standing by. She watched. She waited. She breathed. The first window came and went. Kessler didn't appear. Window closed. No shot. Next window in approximately 3 minutes. More waiting, more breathing, more fighting against the cold that was slowly stealing sensation from her extremities. The second window came. Still nothing. Window closed. No shot. How many more windows before deadline? Thornton asked. Sophie calculated. Approximately 11, sir, assuming the pattern holds. That's 11 chances. Yes, sir, but each window is only 12 seconds, and we need the target to present, which is out of our control. Understood. The third window came. Movement. Sophie's heart rate spiked, then immediately steadied as her training took over. Third floor, left side. A figure approaching the window. Not Kessler. One of his men, dragging a hostage. Target negative, she reported. Hostile with hostage, but not the primary. Can you take the hostile? Negative. Hostage is positioned directly behind him. No clean shot. The hostile pressed his captive against the glass for 30 seconds. Another show of power, then pulled them back into the building. The window closed. Sophie exhaled slowly. Next window in approximately 4 minutes. Target has still not presented. The waiting continued. Her fingers were going numb now despite the hand warmers. Her cheeks burned from the cold. The scope's eye cup was leaving a ring around her orbital bone that would bruise later. None of it mattered. All that mattered was the next window, the next chance, the next 12 seconds where impossible might become merely improbable. The fourth window came, and Victor Kessler stepped into view. He was on his phone, arguing with someone, one of his own men maybe, or perhaps a contact outside. His body language was agitated. His movements were sharp. He paced in front of the window with the careless confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. Target acquired, Sophie breathed, engaging. Everything she was, everything she had trained to be, narrowed to a single point of focus. Wind speed, 34 miles per hour, within acceptable parameters. Distance, 1,247 yards, confirmed by rangefinder. Glass deflection, unknown. Estimate 2 to 3 inches, compensate right. Target movement, pacing, approximately 4 feet of lateral motion every 2 seconds. Flight time, 1.8 seconds. She had to predict where he would be almost 2 seconds from now and place her round exactly there. Her breathing slowed. 2 breaths per minute now, maybe less. Her heart rate dropped to 48 beats per minute. She had measured it enough times to know. The crosshairs settled on a point 3 feet to the left and 2 feet above where Kessler's head currently was. That was her aim point, compensating for wind drift, bullet drop, and estimated glass deflection. Trust the calculation. Trust the wind. Trust that 12 seconds would be enough. Her finger found the trigger, not resting, finding, making contact, establishing the connection between intention and action. 5 seconds left in the window. Kessler's pace brought him to the right side of his pattern. In 1.8 seconds, he would be on the left. Sophie's breathing stopped. Between heartbeats, in that infinite space where the body is perfectly still, where the rifle becomes an extension of self rather than a separate tool, where the universe narrows to a single point of intention, she pressed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The suppressor reduced the sound to a sharp crack that the wind immediately swallowed. Through the scope, she tracked the bullet's invisible flight, watching what it passed through. The disturbed snow, the slight shimmer in the air, the impact point on the window. 1.8 seconds felt like eternity. The glass shattered. The bullet penetrated. Kessler's body jerked. Then he was down. "Shot fired," Sophie reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Target down. Breach teams are go." In the command post, controlled chaos erupted. "All teams, green light. Go, go, go." But Sophie wasn't done. She kept her eye on the scope, scanning the windows for threats. Movement on the second floor. One of Kessler's people, weapon raised, pointing toward the entry point where the breach team would appear in seconds. She could see hostages in the background, pressed against the far wall. The hostile was raising his weapon. No time to calculate. Pure instinct, pure training. She chambered a new round in less than 3 seconds, adjusted her aim by feel alone, squeezed the trigger. The second shot was shorter, 892 yards, better angle. No glass interference. The hostile went down. "2 hostiles neutralized," Sophie reported. "Breach teams have clear entry." Through the chaos of radio chatter, she heard the sounds of flashbangs, doors being breached, controlled violence happening very fast and very precisely. Then after what felt like hours, but was actually 42 seconds. "Command, this is Breach 1. Building secured. All hostages alive. Repeat, all hostages alive." Sophie let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her hands started to shake. Delayed reaction. The price of perfect focus was always the crash that came after. She carefully engaged the safety on her rifle and leaned back from the scope. Below, through the snow, she could see the tactical teams emerging from the building with hostages, medics rushing forward, the organized chaos of a successful operation. She had done it, against odds that should have made it impossible, against doubt from people who should have trusted her, against weather and distance, and every factor that could go wrong. She had done it. "Hartwell," Colonel Thornton's voice on the radio, rough with emotion. "Report to command post for debrief." "Yes, sir." She began the slow process of breaking down her position, packing her rifle, preparing to descend. As she climbed down from the water tower, snow still falling around her, Sophie allowed herself one small moment of satisfaction. Then she pushed it away. There would be time for reflection later. Right now, there were 17 people alive who hadn't been guaranteed that outcome an hour ago. That was enough. The command post felt different when Sophie walked in 30 minutes later. The tension that had filled the room like poison gas had transformed into something else. Exhaustion and relief mixed together in equal measure. Officers who had been staring at screens in rigid concentration were now slumped in chairs, drinking coffee, processing what had just happened. Colonel Thornton looked up as she entered. His eyes were wet. "Corporal Hartwell." She stood at attention, rifle case in hand, snow still melting from her coat. "At ease." Thornton's voice cracked slightly. "Please, sit." Sophie sat, placing her rifle case beside her chair, with the careful reverence of someone handling something sacred, which in a way she was. This rifle had been her father's last gift to her. He had bought it when she was 18, presented it to her on the day she enlisted. "Everything I know is in this weapon," he had said. "Take care of it, and it will take care of you." Thornton studied her for a long moment. "I've been doing this for 35 years. I've seen shots that defied explanation, extractions that succeeded against every statistical prediction, operations that became legends." He paused, searching for words that seemed inadequate. "What you did today, I got lucky, sir." "Lucky?" Thornton almost smiled. "The analysts are already reviewing your performance. Do you want to know what they're saying?" "Not particularly, sir. They're saying it shouldn't have been possible. The wind variables, the glass deflection, the distance. Every factor suggests you beat odds that were worse than we calculated. Substantially worse." He leaned forward. Your first shot traveled 1,247 yards through a crosswind averaging 39 miles per hour through deteriorating glass and impacted within 2 inches of a moving target's kill zone. Your second shot was 892 yards, faster setup, still perfect placement. The second shot was easier. Better angle, no glass. Easier is relative, Corporal. Most snipers wouldn't have attempted your first shot. You then immediately followed it with another shot that saved the breach team from potential casualties. Both shots are going to be studied for a very long time. Sophie said nothing. The door opened behind her. Master Sergeant Ray Cooper walked in. He stopped when he saw her sitting there. Something complicated passed across his face. Shame, maybe, or grudging recognition, or some mixture of both that didn't have a name. Corporal, Sergeant. Cooper pulled up a chair and sat heavily, like the weight of the day had finally caught up with him. I need to say something. Sophie waited. 12 years I've been doing this job. I've trained dozens of snipers, taken shots in 6 different theaters, built a reputation on knowing exactly what's possible and what isn't. He met her eyes directly. I calculated the same odds you did. I looked at the wind, the distance, the glass, and I walked away. That was the smart decision, Sergeant. Maybe, but smart isn't always right. Cooper exhaled slowly. You calculated the same odds and walked toward them anyway. I've been telling myself all day that you got lucky, that no amount of skill could have made that shot reliable. But that's not the whole truth, is it? What do you mean? I mean your father used to say something. Back when I was a young sniper and he was already a legend, he'd say, probability is just a number. People decide outcomes, not mathematics. Cooper's voice roughened. I forgot that somewhere along the way. Started believing in numbers more than people. You reminded me what I'd forgotten. Sophie was quiet for a moment. My father also said that wisdom isn't knowing when to shoot. It's knowing when not to. You weren't wrong to refuse, Sergeant. You were being responsible. And you were being brave. Maybe. Or maybe I was just too young to know better. Cooper almost laughed. No, you knew exactly what you were doing. That's what made it brave. He stood up, extending his hand. I misjudged you, Corporal. I was wrong. You're a better sniper than I am. And more importantly, you're a better soldier. Sophie shook his hand. Thank you, Sergeant. That means more than you know. After Cooper left, the door opened again. Major Diana Walsh stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Sergeant Hartwell, a word? Sophie stood. Ma'am. Walsh stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, I owe you an apology. I questioned your readiness. I questioned your judgment. I questioned whether emotion was driving your decisions instead of training. She paused. I was wrong about the first 2, but I wasn't entirely wrong about the third. Sophie waited. Emotion was driving you, Walsh continued. Your father, the weight of his death, the need to prove something, to yourself, to his memory, to everyone who ever doubted you. Her voice softened unexpectedly. But here's what I didn't understand. Emotion isn't weakness, not when it's channeled correctly. You took all that grief, all that anger, all that need to prove something, and you turned it into the steadiest hands I've ever seen on a rifle. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me, just don't make me regret changing my mind. Walsh's expression shifted again, something almost warm breaking through the professional mask. And Hartwell, your father would be proud. Any father would be. She left without another word. Sophie sat back down, processing. 2 apologies in 10 minutes. From 2 people who had doubted her most. Maybe that was what earning respect looked like. Thornton cleared his throat. There's something else I need to give you. Something I've been holding much longer than that coin. He moved to his desk, unlocked a drawer, and withdrew a small wooden box. Inside, resting on faded velvet, was a medal that made Sophie's breath catch in her throat. Bronze star. Beside it, a small piece of paper, yellowed with age. The coin was for luck, Thornton said quietly. This is for legacy. Your father earned this bronze star for the action in Kuwait that saved my life. He never wore it, said he didn't believe in decorations for doing his duty. But he wanted you to have it. Sophie's hands trembled as she took the box. He left instructions with his effects, Thornton continued, asked me to hold on to it, along with this letter. He wrote it the night before the operation in Helmand, said to give it to you if you ever became a soldier. Sophie unfolded the letter, her father's handwriting, cramped and precise the way he did everything. She read, "Baby girl, if you're reading this, it means two things. First, I'm gone. I'm sorry for that. I always thought I'd have more time to teach you everything I know. But snipers don't always get to choose their exits. Second, it means you followed me into this life. I hoped you wouldn't, but I knew you would. You're too much like me. So here's what I need you to understand. The shot is never about the rifle. It's not about the scope or the bullet or the distance. It's about the person holding the weapon. It's about what you're willing to carry. Every shot you take changes you. The ones that hit, the ones that miss, the ones you don't take. They all leave marks. Some you'll be proud of. Some will haunt you. That's the price of doing what we do. But here's the secret nobody tells you. The hardest shots aren't the long ones. They're not the ones in bad weather or impossible conditions. The hardest shots are the ones where you have to decide whether to pull the trigger at all, when you have to weigh lives against probability and make a choice that could be wrong. When that moment comes, and it will, remember this: the shot you don't take is the only shot guaranteed to miss. And a Hartwell never misses by not trying. I love you, baby girl, more than any words can say. Make me proud. Dad Sophie read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in her pocket, next to her father's challenge coin. I'd like to be alone for a while, sir. Of course. Thornton paused at the door. Hartwell, your father would have been proud of what you did today. Hell, he probably is proud. Somewhere. Thank you, sir. The door closed. Sophie sat in the empty room, holding her father's medal in one hand and the rifle he had given her in the other. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried since his funeral, 11 years ago. But she sat there for a long time, letting the weight of his legacy settle around her shoulders like a mantle she had finally earned the right to wear. 6 weeks later, Sophie stood in front of 32 soldiers. The original group had been 40. 8 had washed out during the assessment phase, not because they lacked skill, but because they couldn't adapt to the program's unique demands. Storm Protocol, they called it. Cross-environmental precision operations, a training program designed to produce snipers who could operate in conditions that would defeat conventional shooters. Sophie hadn't asked for this assignment. Thornton had asked her. The best way to honor your father's legacy, he had said, is to pass it on. So here she was, 24 years old, standing in front of men and women with more combat experience than she had years on Earth, expected to teach them something they didn't believe could be taught. I'm not going to tell you how to make impossible shots, she began. The room was silent, watching, judging. Because there's no formula for that. What I will teach you is how to make impossible situations slightly less impossible. How to read conditions everyone else says are unreadable. How to find the 2-second window in an hour of chaos. She paused. And most importantly, how to decide when trying is worth the risk. One soldier raised his hand. Specialist Kevin Hughes, early 30s. The kind of confidence that came from being good and knowing it. Sergeant, with respect, we've all heard about Ridgemont. We've all seen the analysis. What you did was incredible, but it was also lucky. How do you teach luck? You don't. Luck isn't teachable. Sophie walked to the front of the room, her gait unhurried. But recognizing when luck might happen is. Every environment has patterns. Wind doesn't blow randomly. It follows terrain, temperature, pressure systems. Snow doesn't fall uniformly. It thins and thickens based on updrafts and downdrafts. If you learn to read those patterns, you can identify moments where probability shifts in your favor. And those moments last, what? Seconds. 12 seconds in my case. Missing them means waiting for the next one. That's not luck. That's observation. That's patience. That's choosing to see what others overlook. Another hand, Corporal Megan Torres, younger than Sophie, same intensity in her eyes. How do you handle the pressure, knowing that if you miss, people die? Sophie considered the question. This was the one she had been dreading, because the honest answer wasn't reassuring. You don't handle it, you carry it. She held Torres's gaze. The pressure doesn't disappear because you've accepted responsibility. It sits on your chest every second you're in position. The trick isn't managing the pressure, it's not letting the pressure manage you. You acknowledge it. Then you focus on the one thing you can control, the next breath, the next calculation, the next micro adjustment. And if you freeze, then you tell someone immediately, because a sniper who freezes gets people killed. Sophie's voice hardened. There's no shame in recognizing you can't take the shot. There's only shame in pretending you can and then failing when lives depend on it. The room absorbed this. I'll say something else, Sophie continued. Something nobody tells you when you sign up for this job. She looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. The shots that hit aren't the ones that haunt you. It's the ones you don't take. The ones where you calculated the odds and walked away. The ones where someone died because you weren't willing to risk being wrong. She touched her pocket, where her father's challenge coin rested against her heart. My father taught me that the shot you don't take is the only shot guaranteed to miss. If you're in this room, it's because you've decided to be ready, even when every number says you'll fail. That's not recklessness. That's commitment, and it's the difference between a sniper and a soldier with a long rifle. The training itself was brutal. Sophie pushed them through scenarios designed to guarantee failure, shooting at 1,400 yards and 40-mile-per-hour winds, making calculations while physically exhausted, taking shots through compromised materials, working in temperatures cold enough to affect equipment function. Day after day, week after week, the ones who couldn't adapt washed out. The ones who remained grew harder, sharper, more capable of making decisions when everything suggested there was no good decision to make. On the final day, Sophie set up a simulation. Hostage situation, compromised building, limited time, terrible weather conditions that the training center's environmental systems replicated with impressive accuracy. You have one shooter, she told them. Choose. They huddled, argued, analyzed. Finally, Torres stepped forward. I'll take it, Sophie nodded. Tell me why. Because I've hit this type of shot 3 times this week. Because I'm confident in current conditions. And because if I miss, Torres paused. I can live with knowing I tried. Good answer. Take your position. Torres sat up, ran her calculations, waited for her window. When she fired, the shot was perfect. Target down, hostages saved, simulation complete. The room erupted in congratulations. Sophie walked over. Well done, Corporal. Now tell me the part you didn't say. Torres's expression shifted. Ma'am, you chose yourself because you believed you could make it. But that's not the only reason. What's the other one? Torres hesitated, then quietly. Because if someone had to fail, I'd rather it be my failure than someone else's. Sophie almost smiled. That's the answer I was waiting for. Being the one willing to take the shot isn't about confidence. It's about being willing to carry the weight if things go wrong. Remember that. It'll matter more than any technique I've taught you. Torres nodded slowly. Yes, Sergeant. Dismissed. The soldiers filed out, talking amongst themselves, replaying the exercise. Sophie remained behind. Alone in the empty training room, she pulled out her father's challenge coin and turned it over in her fingers. Ghost. She had spent 11 years trying to live up to that name. Maybe she finally had. 4 months after Ridgemont, Sophie was called to Colonel Thornton's office. He was standing at the window when she entered, watching snow fall over the base. The weather had been strange all winter, storms appearing from nowhere, temperatures dropping to dangerous levels. The kind of conditions that made military operations exponentially more difficult. Sergeant Hartwell, thank you for coming. Sir, sit, please. Sophie sat, noticing the map spread across Thornton's desk. In unfamiliar region, urban terrain, dense population. We have a situation, Thornton said without preamble. American Embassy compound, hostile territory. Security has been deteriorating for months. Standard extraction isn't viable due to local political complications. If we send troops openly, we trigger an international incident that makes everything worse. How many personnel at the embassy? 47. Ambassador, staff, families. Thornton turned from the window. There's a local faction leader who's been threatening the compound for weeks. Intelligence suggests he's planning an assault within 72 hours. If that happens, everyone inside dies before we can respond. Sophie felt the familiar weight settling onto her shoulders. You want me to eliminate the faction leader? I want you to assess whether it's possible. If you say no, we'll find another approach. Thornton moved to the desk, gesturing at the map. His compound is here. The only viable shooting position is here. A building under construction, 23 stories, unfinished. The distance is 2,100 yards. Sophie stared at the map. 2,100 yards. Nearly 2 miles. The longest confirmed sniper shot in history was 2,500 yards, made by a Canadian Special Forces operator in ideal conditions with a .50 caliber rifle specifically designed for extreme range. This would be the second longest shot ever attempted, in urban environment with unknown wind conditions against a moving target. Sir, Sophie's voice was careful. That's outside confirmed range for my weapon system. Outside confirmed range for most weapon systems. I know. The probability of success? 20%, maybe less. Thornton met her eyes. I've run the numbers, Hartwell. I know what I'm asking. Then why ask? Because every other option has a 0% chance of success. And because your father made a shot in Kuwait that the analysts said had 15% odds. Thornton's voice softened. He made it anyway, and I'm still alive because of it. Sophie looked at the map. 2,100 yards, urban terrain, unknown conditions. Her father's longest confirmed shot had been 1,100 yards. This would mean surpassing him by nearly double. If I miss, she said slowly, we lose our only chance. The faction leader goes to ground, increases security, and the embassy falls within the week. Yes, and if I refuse, then we have no chance at all. Thornton paused. I won't order you to take this shot, Sergeant. Just like I didn't order you to take the shot at Ridgemont. This is your call. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her father's letter, about the words he had written the night before he died. The shot you don't take is the only shot guaranteed to miss. When do I leave? 48 hours. We'll provide full satellite data, wind measurements at multiple elevations, building material specifications, everything we can give you. I'll need Corporal Torres as my spotter. Done. Sophie stood. Sir, one more thing. Yes? My father's challenge coin, the one you gave me. She pulled it from her pocket, held it up to the light. You said it was for luck, that he'd carried it through 3 deployments without a scratch. Thornton nodded slowly. I remember. Did I earn the right to carry it? The old colonel looked at her for a long time. This young woman who had become, somehow, the best sniper he had ever known, who had taken her father's legacy and transformed it into something new, something her own. You earned it the moment you climbed that water tower, he said quietly. The moment you decided that 42% was better than 0. Your father would be proud of you, Sophie. He would be so goddamn proud. Sophie tucked the coin back into her pocket. Thank you, sir, for everything. She turned to leave. Hartwell. She paused at the door. 20% odds. Thornton's voice was rough. What did your father always say about probability? Sophie almost smiled. Probability is just a number, sir. People decide outcomes, not mathematics. Then go decide an outcome, Sergeant, and come back alive. Yes, sir. She walked out of the office, leaving Thornton alone with his maps and his memories and the ghost of a friend who had died 22 years ago. That night, Sophie sat in her quarters, cleaning her rifle for the 5th time since receiving the mission briefing. It was already clean, had been clean after the second breakdown, but the repetitive motion helped her think, helped her process what she was about to attempt. 2,100 yards, nearly 2 miles, a distance so extreme that the bullet would be in the air for almost 3 seconds. 3 seconds during which wind, temperature, humidity, and a dozen other factors could push it off course. 3 seconds during which the target could move, turn, disappear. 3 seconds during which everything could go wrong. Her phone buzzed. A text from Torres. Heard we're traveling. Bring extra hand warmers. Sophie smiled slightly. Torres had figured out her weakness during training. Cold hands. The first thing to lose sensation during long operations. The thing that could make the difference between a clean shot and a miss. She texted back, Already packed. Get sleep. Tomorrow is prep day. Tomorrow's always prep day in this job. True enough? Sophie set down her phone and reached for her father's challenge coin one last time. The metal was warm from being in her pocket all day. She traced the word etched into its surface. Ghost, her father's call sign, his legacy, and now somehow hers to carry forward. Tomorrow she would begin preparing for the most difficult shot of her life. 2,100 yards, nearly 2 miles, a distance that would make Ridgemont look like target practice. But tonight, she allowed herself one moment of peace. She had done the impossible once. She would do it again. Not because she was fearless, she wasn't. Not because she was certain, she never would be. But because somewhere along the way, between her father's death and Ridgemont and everything that came after, she had learned the truth that defined her. The shot you don't take is the only shot guaranteed to miss. And Sophie Hartwell had never missed by not trying. She picked up her phone one more time, opened her photos, found the one she was looking for. Her father in desert camouflage, holding her on his shoulders. She was maybe 5 years old. They were both laughing at something off camera. She couldn't remember what anymore, but she remembered the feeling, safe, loved, like nothing in the world could ever hurt her as long as he was there. "I'm ready, Dad," she whispered to the empty room. "I hope you're watching." She set down the phone and turned off the light. Outside her window, the stars continued to shine, cold, distant, indifferent to the struggles of the people below. But Sophie didn't need the stars to care. She didn't need the universe to be on her side. She just needed 12 seconds. 12 seconds where the wind dropped and the world held its breath and everything aligned for one perfect moment. 12 seconds to change everything. She had found those seconds once before, on a frozen water tower in Montana, with 17 lives hanging in the balance. She would find them again, because that's what Hartwells did. They found the impossible shot, and they took it.